Hello everybody and welcome to One Piece chapter 1026. This is a chapter that has a very clear message, in my opinion, which is that this is the beginning of the end of Wano. We have officially entered the introduction to the conclusion of this arc. So put your seatbelts on because we're going to be stepping on the gas from here on out. The cover request shows Nami with a reference to her childhood. Back in the day, Bellemere gave Nami a hand-me-down with the exact same logo on it, except back then, Nami didn't like the shirt because she knew it was a hand-me-down, and she knew that the shirt had originally belonged to Nojiko, and that Bellemere had just turned it into a lion. So she didn't like it back then, she was complaining that they were poor, and now everything comes full circle, because now it's like a high-end brand that they have going on there with the boutique. So it's kind of like a remember where you came from moment. I also think the logo could be a reference to sun god Nika, because you have a sunflower there, so sunflower, sun. We also have the lions and Leo there. We know that like the zodiac sign Leo is ruled by the sun, and we also know that Nika kind of looks like he has a mane, like a fiery mane. Looks like he has the head of a lion. It also goes along with some of Luffy's previous outfits, because he's worn sunflowers before, like in Dressrosa, he was wearing a sunflower shirt, and then at the end of Punk Hazard he was wearing a lion jacket. So I definitely think that that symbol is going to be very important in the finale of the series. Also, Professor Clover, who knows about the Ancient Kingdom, was also seen in this panel wearing a lion shirt as well. So instead of like hidden Mickeys, this is all like hidden Sun God Nika endgame symbolism stuff. The title of the chapter is a reference to a mountain located in Kyoto, Japan named Mount Tennosan. Historically, it's a very important mountain because of its strategic location, so in the past, there were several battles that took place, and whichever army took control of the mountain first, gained a substantial strategic advantage. So the mountain is considered to be a place that can decide the fate of a battle. So it represents a turning point, which is what we get in this chapter. Also, one of the most important battles that took place in that mountain is called the Battle of Yamasaki, which was all about avenging a dead lord. We start off at the capital with Mount Fuji in the background there, which I'm sure at some point we'll get to go there. I think that's where Kaido and Luffy will have their final clash. Anyway, Hitetsu is thinking about Tama, and of course we know that a very popular theory is that Hitetsu is actually Oden's dad, not only because both characters have the same voice actor, but also because Tenguyama Hitetsu would fit the age of Sukiyaki if he were still alive, which, you know, he is. And then I also like how we see Toko enjoying some cotton candy, because I think what's going to happen is that Chopper is going to find a cure for the smiley side effects so that people don't have to laugh all the time. So he's going to cure them, and then Chopper will be able to enjoy some cotton candy of his own once this is all said and done. We see that Onigashima is approaching the flower capital, but nobody can see it because when Momonosuke and Kaido turn into their full dragon forms, they create a bunch of storm clouds. So that's kind of obstructing the island from view. We got one of these guys reporting from the rooftop. Unfortunately for him, he doesn't get to report very long because he gets flampayed with the King's Hockey clash. He looks like one of the guys that was around Who's Who for a moment there, and we still don't know what's up with these people. Like, what's up with the eye symbol? What does it mean? Yamato recognizes the pink dragon as Momo because they've met before. Then Kaido goes for the bottle breath and Momonosuke is barely able to dodge it with Luffy on board. And then Luffy jumps up and prepares a geared third punch. And I think it's poetic. If you look at each of the rounds in which Luffy has fought Kaido, there's been 3 rounds so far. And each of the rounds actually starts with Luffy punching Kaido on the head with a geared third attack. So first round, we got an elephant gun to the head. In chapter 1000, the way that round 2 starts is with Luffy hitting Kaido on the head with Red Rock, and then round 3, which we get in this chapter, opens up with another elephant gun to the head, which is the exact same way that round 1 opened. So it's going to end the way it started. So Kaido gets his face shot into the ground, and Momonosuke has a sequence of flashbacks. The first one is to Luffy, telling him to bite Kaido, and he's a little bit hesitant at first, but then he remembers all the evil, nasty things that Kaido did to his family, and he gets the courage to charge on and bite down on Kaido, and make him yell in pain. Now, I know there are fans out there that had a problem with this scene because it's like, how can Momonosuke hurt Kaido like this, right? Personally, I didn't find the scene problematic, and there's several reasons, there's several factors that go into why I don't think it's a problem. Number one is that, like, I don't see any blood coming from Kaido. So from where I stand, the damage of that bite is incredibly superficial. That's number one. Number two is that before he lands the bite on Kaido, there's a brief zoom into Momo's eye with a glare. And so I did think, like, is he tapping into King's Haki? in that scene? Is that what's going on there? Because Odin had King's Haki, right? So why not Momo? But even then, let's say that you don't believe any of that. So in my last review, I actually spent some time explaining how Momonosuke's Devil Fruit is a direct clone of Kaido's Devil Fruit, because Momonosuke's Devil Fruit was made out of Kaido's DNA. So if it's a copy of Kaido's fruit, then that means that Dragon Form Momonosuke should have all of the biological properties that Kaido has when he's in dragon form. And so if you remember, there's a scene in chapter 992 where Kaido uses Boro Breath, and Raizo uses his Devil Fruit power, his scroll magic, to absorb the beam, to absorb the blast with his scroll, and then he just returns it. He essentially just mirrors back the attack, and he hits Kaido with the same blast that he produced. So if it's possible for Kaido's own blast to make him yell out in pain, I think it's also pretty reasonable that a bite from his own teeth would make him yell out in pain as well. The moment's really about like Luffy pulling a psychological mental trick on Momonosuke for him to gain confidence, because again, Luffy's so good at reading people and kind of knowing what they need. Speaking of that, I know that Momonosuke says that he can't use Boro Breath, but I wonder if that's Oda saving Momonosuke's like fire blast for a specific special occasion. We get a shot of the top of Onigashima, and you can see that there's a crack on top of one of the eyes, which I'm sure was something that was created by Momonosuke in the previous chapter when he was flying all over the place, smashing into the walls and stuff. So that's kind of why I'm saying that the final portion of this fight needs to move elsewhere, specifically to Mount Fuji. Anyway, Momo's biting down on Kaido. Kaido's like, what are you doing? What are you trying to do here? For a moment, it looks like Momonosuke is in danger because Kaido is preparing a counterattack. Yamato notices this and goes in there to try and protect Momonosuke, but before anybody can do anything else, bam! Luffy jumps in there and punches Kaido on the cheek. That's actually my favorite panel of this chapter. Luffy just landing that punch from the side. I kind of got the impression that he was using Rio in that panel, because that's the way that the Rio impact looks sometimes. But also I like the idea of it being Rio, because I like to think that Luffy, throughout this chapter, Luffy is sort of gradually increasing the levels of his haki. So for example, right, the elephant gun at the beginning, I like to think that that's like basic armament haki. That's like gear third with basic armament hardening. Then this punch on the side, that's Rio, right? So that's a level above basic armament haki. And then the final clash at the end that splits the sky, he's obviously using Advanced Conqueror's haki. So yeah, I kind of like the idea that he's kind of warming up and going through the levels of haki, like 1, 2, and 3. Also, just having Yamato there watching this happen really reminded me of what Luffy said in last night's episode. Luffy then goes on to tell Momonosuke to stop Onigashima, and I remember when I first brought up the idea of Momonosuke using his dragon clouds to stop the island, somebody wrote down in the comment section that if that happens, that would be kind of cool because it would also be a parallel to Odin, because Odin also lifted something up to protect others. And at first I thought that Luffy was using his voice of all things power to communicate with the lower level, but no, it's actually the guy with the eye symbol who's like transmitting all of Luffy's words downstairs. I like how there's a panel of Yamato that precedes a panel of Sanji and Zoro, because if Yamato joins the crew, then those three characters, Zoro, Sanji, and Yamato, will be the strongest right after Luffy. So I kind of like how they're being grouped together visually. Luffy then goes on to say that he's going to defeat Kaido, and of course everybody cheers because Luffy is Oda's favorite character. Apparently Kid's ambition was assassinated because he's pretty much given up on trying to take down Kaido. I guess I just thought that because of what had been established at the ending of Act 1, leading up to entering Onigashima, I just thought that Oda was setting up like a Goku and Vegeta team up against Kaido with Luffy and Kid. But no, that's not the case here anymore. Kaido goes back to hybrid form and prepares an Advanced Conqueror's haki attack. Luffy prepares one to match it, and they clash. This chapter, to me at least, officially confirms that Luffy is now legitimately, officially, the 5th Yonko. I didn't believe it after Whole Cake Island. I thought that title was premature at the time, so I agreed with Teach, saying that it was too soon to be calling Luffy a Yonko. But this chapter right here, right now, visually confirms that this is now a Yonko level clash. That being said, I think it's logical to assume that Luffy is the weakest of the 5 Yonko right now, but nonetheless, he has entered the Yonko ranks. I like how the splitting of the sky serves a function in this scene. It's not just like, oh, look how cool it looks. Like, it's like, no, I mean, that's part of it, but really it does serve a purpose, which is that it splits the sky and makes the full moon visible again so that Inu and Neko can go back to using Sulong. Regardless, I like how both attacks seem to have a similar effect on their opponent. It's basically a beam that shoots right through the opponent's body and shatters something. So in Perospero's case, it shatters his candy arm, and in Jack's case, it shatters his belt buckle. Now maybe I'm just reading too much into this scene, but I'm going to tell you how it kind of read for me, because the basis for both the dog and the cat's attack is Oden Itoryu, right? Oden one sword style. And so I think that's interesting because if we think back on Oden, right, we know that Oden had 2 swords. And one of the swords that he used was Ame no Habakiri. And Ame no Habakiri is supposed to be the sword capable of splitting the heavens in half, in 2. And so what do we see in that full page spread? We have a shot of the sky literally splitting apart in half. And then we get the dog and the cat saying, Oden's one sword style. The one sword being Ame no Habakiri. And Inu and Neko's attacks are actually very similar to the attacks that we saw them land on Kaido in chapter 992 when they were fighting along with the rest of the Scabbards. The only thing I really am confused about though is that I'm not really sure if the beam that they're shooting, I'm not sure if that's Rio, so I'm not sure if it's hockey or if it's actually an electrical current that they're shooting from, the power that the Minks have to use electricity. But yeah, I think this chapter makes it obvious that Inuarashi actually did end up defeating Jack, because in one of the panels where Jack looks like a mammoth centaur, Jack actually tells Inu, if you had landed one more good hit on me, I might not have been able to stand anymore. So rest in pieces, Berorin and Jack. I think that Oda probably thought, I've already used these characters in previous arcs. I used Jack and Zoe and Perospero and Whole Cake, so I might as well just wrap things up with them here. I actually thought that Inuarashi was going to lose his fight, and that somebody else was going to come in to take his place. I still think that we need to get more backstory from Jack, so my hope is that we get more info about him during a Yamato and Kaido flashback. Because remember, Yamato and Jack are literally the same age. Also, Carrot and Wanda kind of feel like they're just a piece of wallpaper in that scene. It just kind of feels like a lot of these characters are being rushed out the door because it's closing time. It's Luffy time, so you gotta hurry up and get out of the bathroom, even if you're not done yet. The amount of tension that we're getting from this final part of the arc is equal to the amount of named attacks that we got to see from Jack. I think there was a commercial recently where Oda said that the story was entering its final stage. And so I think what's happening now is that because the world of One Piece is so vast, there's so many characters in it, right? And then we get a batch of new characters every single arc, but at the same time, Oda knows that he's headed towards the end. I think what's happening now is that we are becoming more and more dependent on supplemental material to fill in the gaps. So as the story goes on, we're going to be looking more and more at those sources of information, at that content, that supplemental material, to gain more insight. I'm talking about the data books, the visual dictionaries, Vivre cards, SBS sections, my personal headcanon, the anime. All of those things will help us flesh out some of these moments and some of these characters further. Oh, and the light novels. I forgot. We might get some light novels by the end of the series, giving us more character backstory or side quests and stuff like that. Just like we got one from Ace. Anyway, the chapter ends with Orochi, and there's a reason for why I didn't mention Tama at the beginning of the review, and that's because I wanted to link Tama's character with Orochi's character by the end here. So in case you don't know, there's a very popular theory that says that Tama is actually a Kurozumi, and I happen to think that this chapter fully supports that theory. So one of the things that we know needs to be addressed by the end of this arc is the cycle of hate involving the Kurozumi clan, because the new generation of Kurozumi have been unfairly persecuted for a crime that they didn't commit. And so we know that when Luffy visits an island, he produces meaningful change, right? That's what he does. So it's not enough for Orochi and Kanjuro to just be KO'd, defeated, right? Because then that doesn't really solve anything. And so if we look at the way that this chapter starts, it starts off with Tama saying, I can't just sit around and do nothing while my friends are, on Onigashima fighting. So I have to do something. Compare the beginning of this chapter with the end of this chapter, where we have Orochi saying, oh, Jack got defeated? Well, that's not my problem, I don't really care. And so, assuming that Tama is a Kurozumi, and I think that this chapter pretty much solidifies that she is, what you have in this chapter is like essentially a contrast between two members of the Kurozumi clan. It's kind of funny too, because if you look at both of their panels, both of the characters are actually occupying the exact same space, right? So Tama, in the beginning, the first page, she's at the bottom left corner, like on this little strip. And then Orochi is the same thing. He's in the same place at the end of the chapter. So I think it's kind of obvious now that the redemption of the Kurozumi clan is going to come from Tama. Tama has had such a big role in this war, sort of changing the tides with her Kibidango. And so I think that's going to help. That's going to be like a thing that is going to make her case for her like being a Kurozumi, and the people of Wano viewing the Kurozumi clan from a different perspective and saying, wow, this little girl, like she played such a huge role in helping us take down Kaido. So maybe the Kurozumi clan isn't that bad after all. Also, if Tenguyama Hitetsu ends up being Oden's dad / Sukiyaki, then he can vouch for Tama. Right? He can pretty much try to convince the people of Wano that the Kurozumi clan is actually okay because him and Tama were friends. Plus, he's also the previous shogun of Wano, so I'm pretty sure that his words would still carry some amount of influence and credibility. Now, at one point, Oden says that the ability to read the poneglyphs is something that has been passed down from one father to one son throughout the generations of Wano. Unfortunately, because Oden died, he didn't get to pass down that knowledge to his son, Momonosuke. But if Momonosuke's grandfather, Sukiyaki, turns out to be alive, then he can be the one to teach Momonosuke how to read the poneglyphs. And that would also kind of explain why it is that Sukiyaki wears a mask and is in hiding. Because if Kaido were to find out who he was, he would probably use Sukuyaki's knowledge to decipher the poneglyphs. Kaido would torture him for that knowledge, kind of like the way that Black Maria was planning to do with Robin. I'm assuming that there are still some poneglyphs left to read around the world, so maybe if Momonosuke learns how to decipher them, at one point he can go on his own adventure around the world to just read all of the poneglyphs that are left, and then maybe he can communicate the meaning of what he finds telepathically back to Luffy. Anyway, the last time we saw Orochi, he was trying to start a fire, right? He was burning stuff, and then he ran into the Scabbards. He transformed into his 8-headed snake form, and then the Scabbards kind of cut his heads off. I think that was the last time we saw him. So we'll probably get an explanation as to how he's able to regenerate his heads using his mythical type Zoan Devil Fruit. Also, that little section where Inuarashi and Orochi are in, it should be on the second floor, which is where we know Tama is with Speed, with Nami, and Usopp. So my hope is that after Orochi exposes that Tama is a Kurozumi, we get like Usopp like trying to protect Tama, and then hopefully we get a really cool Wano sniper moment for Usopp, which is long overdue. I know people are saying that we should wait till Elbaf, but I mean, come on, like this is Wano, it's important. Like all of the Straw Hats have gotten something cool to do, I think, in this arc. Usopp should not be the exception. So hopefully we get to see that. That's just my take. Especially because like Orochi, we've seen Orochi like using pistols to shoot people, and so maybe there's like a good like sniping sort of like showdown coming up. Hopefully, I think that at this point we can pretty much like visualize what are some of the boxes that are left to check. We know that Big Mom is fighting Kid in Law in the second floor as well, so we need to get to that at some point. We know that Killer versus Hawkins is also taking place. There are still 4 numbers that need to be revealed, because we don't even know what they look like. Drake and Apu completely disappeared. I don't know what happened with them. I don't know if Drake decided to go back to the Marines. Obviously, we have Sanji versus Queen left, Zoro versus King, and then, you know, the big shebang, Luffy versus Kaido. So we have a pretty good idea of what the chapters are going to be about from here until the end of the year. And so the hook for this final portion of the arc really isn't about what's going to happen, because we already have a pretty clear blueprint of what we know needs to happen in the story. But it's more about the how that happens, and also what other information will get revealed through that process. So yeah, overall, I thought the chapter was okay. Let me know your thoughts about it down below in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for all of your support. And I will catch you here next week. Bye.